The Video Voyeurism Prevention Act. This act states that you can't take pictures of a person's private parts without their consent. So here you have a very invasive naked image of a person that's being taken, oftentimes without their consent because they're not notified of what these machines are and they're not really given a viable alternative. The Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And this Nadira talked about a little bit. Probably she's a little more well versed on this than I am, but the basics of this act are that the government cannot do something that creates a substantial burden on religion and is not the least restrictive means. So here, these devices create a very substantial burden on a number of world religions, including Islam, Sikhs, conservative Jewish religion, and Catholicism. All of these religions have actually spoken out against these machines. And it is not indeed the least restrictive means. There have been a lot of proposals that have been set forth about other devices that can be used, other methods that can be used that would likely be as effective, if not more so, especially since these machines don't actually detect powdered explosives. Bomb-sniffing dogs, the automated target recognition technology, something along those lines that would be perhaps more effective, less restrictive. We also filed suit under the Fourth Amendment. This amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures as a general matter. Specifically, in the context of airport searches, the TSA is given pretty wide latitude by the courts. Understandably, we have a national security threat, so there is wide latitude to the government there. But the courts have said that you cannot start off with the most invasive search. You have to have an escalating search. And here, especially when you're talking about using these machines as a primary screening method, you're starting off with a very, very, very invasive search technique, a technique that essentially takes a picture of a person's naked body and then shows it to a TSA agent. It's just not permissible under the Fourth Amendment. You could possibly get to that as secondary or third level screening, but to make it your primary screening method is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. There's also the question of reasonableness, which is at the core of the Fourth Amendment. And when you're talking about a machine that is not all that effective at picking up one of the primary threats to air security, it seems very unreasonable that you would require people to trade over such a large amount of their privacy and undergo such an invasive screening method in order to gain what is illusory security, something that's not effective at picking up PETN. So EPIC has asked that this program be suspended, pending proper public rulemaking and an independent assessment of the health effects, the effectiveness, and the privacy implications. The core issue here is that we are being asked continually to give up more and more of our freedom and more of our privacy for methods that are arguably very ineffective. So we're exchanging privacy for the illusion of security. We need to focus on methods that effectively detect threats and respect our privacy and other fundamental rights, instead of settling for methods that do neither. Thank you.
We have very little time left. I had one question that I wanted to pose to the panelists, and then we'll open it up to Q&A from you folks. And I will start with Ms. Walton, but I want to hear other reactions to this. And we've heard a bit today about the question of auditing and keeping track of these incidents. And there have been assertions made on both sides about what's going on. Does TSA have some comprehensive auditing mechanism for keeping track of who's pulled over for secondary or tertiary screenings and how often that happens? And does it do an internal assessment of that? And finally, I think I know the answer to the last bit, but is there any way that the public can have access to any of that information?
So I think the answer to that depends on the reason a person is sent to secondary. I described for a moment the behavior detection officer program, and if the BDOs agree at a certain level, a person can be referred to secondary. There is some limited capturing of information, but for purposes, generally, there is an explanation, and so to capture information just because the person, looks suspicious or had unusual behaviors in the line, so we only capture it if there's a determination that Leo's, the local law enforcement is called, and then we capture it. But, we don't capture other information, so no, there's no information to
Can I add? I mean, but I think you said in your remarks, and I know I've heard it other places, cites about how many times people opt out. What percentage of the population opts out? I mean, how do you get that number without some kind of auditing mechanism?
Oh, so yes, they know how many people opt out, but they don't know who. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do they track that by airport, or are there airports that are more people who opt out or less, or are there by race or anything? I'm just curious if there's been a way to.
I shouldn't speak to that because I'm getting that third hand. So, but I know that they do have a way of knowing the percentage or the number that opt out.
Okay. Actually, before I turn to the audience, one other thing that I'd like all the panelists to address, or whoever wants to. But one of the big questions here is the alternatives, and Ginger, you touched on this a bit. That's an issue both in litigation, because that's one of the prongs of at least one of the claims that you're making in your lawsuit. Are there less restrictive alternatives? And so I guess I would put it to the critics of TSA on this first. Can you give us some less restrictive alternatives, and do you have any sense of how effective those would be?
We've heard a lot of discussion about bomb-sniffing dogs. I know Representative Jason Chaffetz is a big proponent of this. He likes to joke that the only reason why the body scanner machines are in the airports and the bomb-sniffing dogs aren't is because the dogs don't have lobbyists. But another suggestion is possibly the automated target recognition. But importantly there, you need to be sure, and this is why we requested documents about this, that's not just a software overlay that is projecting on the screen the more sanitized image, the stick figure image, while at the same time the machines are still capable of storing and transferring the underlying very graphic image.
I mean, I think I would add to that list the explosive trace detection, where there's individuals' hands are swabbed. I think that's an important technological mechanism, and one that's less invasive. Generally, the fact is that every dollar you're putting into this is a dollar that's not going to track down people at the airport, or that outside of the airport, and look for potential threats and act on real intelligence. So I think that is an alternative that's important. And I also think that we have not internalized, and I don't blame TSA for this. I think it's a political reality. We haven't internalized the fact that there is not perfect security. And so we continue to sort of demand alternatives that are perfect and are somehow going to solve the problem. And as long as that is the metric under which we're measuring everything, I think it's going to be difficult to find any perfect alternative.
We talked a lot about enhanced intelligence operations. And I think that the security screening should happen before we get to the airport. There was a study recently released that approximately 40% of the terrorist threats involving Muslims were thwarted with help from the Muslim community. So it's my suggestion to let's not isolate, let's not disenfranchise this community that you need the help from, that the government needs the help from. Abdul Muttalib was reported by his own family, and again, the dots were not connected, but don't punish and don't target a Muslim community or a community in general that you want to help you with your intelligence gathering. So that is one way to support and to enhance airport security.